Okay, let's begin. I am Lanice Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive, healing-based conversations designed to illuminate the adoptee, parents, and the adoption curious. We center the topics around community, mentorship, leadership, and healing, so you get a multi-dimensional view that is ultimately empowering. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. Hey y'all, if you've seen me on Instagram, I'm in my summer glow phase and I am unapologetic about it. My hair is luscious. Fun fact, I didn't start properly treating and doing my own hair until I was a grown adult because like many Black adoptees, no one showed me how to do my own hair. And because I love you all so much, I'm going to share with you my hair secret. I'm always on the lookout for things you'd love and things that will enhance your well-being inside and out. We Unique Cosmetics sent me their Moisture Lock pomade and scalp and hair therapy oil from their Metamorphosis line, and it's so decadent, light, and nourishing, fam. This has become a hair routine staple. It has a soft lemongrass scent that people comment on when I walk by or when they're doing my hair because now I have boho locks. They also sent me a 15% discount link for you to try their products and hair tutorial service. And Unique Cosmetics is Black owned and operated by a mother and daughter duo dedicated to helping the adoptee community. Check out the link in the show notes. And this is for all ages, fam. So tell your friends. So come on, embark on a hair-loving journey with We Unique World. From interactive workshops to premium products, they're all about empowering you to embrace your unique hair journey. Because remember, all hair is good hair, especially when it's healthy. Hey there, how you doing? I am so excited to get right into the conversation this week. This offering is so good. Shelby Redfield Kilgore is here. She is a 2-time Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and author of the blog Behind the Lens, as well as co-writer of the book Rooted in Adoption, a collection of adoptee reflections. We dive into a lot of really heartfelt conversations and vulnerable topics. We discuss her filmmaking and how she found her artistic voice, how the stories she collects has informed her own adoption journey, the societal pressures of single mothers in Korea, and how that has affected how she views her own culture, the imperative of adoptive parents getting thorough, comprehensive education before they adopt, and then we end with how she found courage through her breast cancer journey. It is such an honor to have people trust me with these precious stories, and Shelby did just that. I do not take this work lightly. It's incredibly admirable how Shelby has alchemized her struggles to create art that has changed the world. And now she is offering us the opportunity of looking into the background, the setup, and the behind the scenes of how she creates that art. And so that's incredibly exciting for me as an artist myself, but as someone who knows that her story is invaluable. So let's get to it.
Well, I'm adopted from South Korea, and I was raised by white parents in the early 1980s. And I always had like a love for films and TV shows. And so I started this journey back in 2012 where I started filming adoption stories. And I launched my YouTube channel in 2013. And the people most willing to share their stories with me were adoptive parents. And so they sort of paved the way. As other people started seeing my work, adoptees came forward to want to share their stories as well. And so I just have always filmed all the different perspectives, like in the adoption constellation. A big part of that is also because my mom, who raised me, my adoptive mom, she placed a baby for adoption when she was 16 years old, and she felt like she had no other choice. So I knew this. She shared that with me when I was 11 years old, and she told me that she wanted to be the adoptive parent she hoped her son had growing up. Because her and my father had fertility issues. After that, she was never able to carry a baby to term. And she thinks it's from the trauma of having to place her baby for adoption at such a young age when she was 16.
That's such a powerful reason that I haven't run across yet. Mm-hmm. Wow. So has she met her biological child?
Yes, and I'm okay to share with this because I'm sorry. I feel like just jumping back into the scene of like, whose short story are we okay to share, but my mom has her story. I was able to film her story for my channel. And she, with his permission, was able to share parts of their reunion. 47 years later, she found him and they reunited. And it was something she had wanted to know for so many years. I feel like the grief she had and not knowing, if he was okay, like every holiday, was kind of hard for her. And she started searching for him years before, like, they reunited, and she found out his name and from a private detective, and he actually reached out to him, but he was never told he was adopted. Like, he grew up in the era when, a lot of families, if it was the same race adoption, like, didn't tell their children. They kept it a secret. And so he thought it was a bogus phone call and didn't think much of it. But then later, one Christmas Day, my mom was crying because she just wanted to see a picture of him. And I'm like, well, let's look it up on Facebook. And I found him. Like, you could just immediately tell that they had to be related. Like, you just saw the similarities. They were striking. And then she got up the courage to email him. And he responded, and they connected that way.
Wow. I rarely say this when it comes to adoption, but that is a beautiful story.
Oh, yeah. And because I knew, like, the pain my mom had and the trauma that she had as a first mother, it made our relationship that much, like, stronger and empathetic, because she understood where I was coming from my adoption trauma since I was very little, and from her trauma as well, from that loss. So she already knew about the loss and adoption from her side. And I was very fortunate to grow up in a really open environment and safe environment to talk about my adoption feelings, whether they were me being super angry or upset about how unfair it was, how much I missed my first mother. And my mom just let me, express myself in any way, shape, or form, really, because I'm a very emotional person. And I think that's because she allowed me to express myself. And the reason why I do these stories to help other people share them, like, through the video lens, is because when I was 17, my parents took my brother and I, who's also adopted from Korea, but we're not biologically related, to South Korea on a homeland tour with several other adoptive families. And I was fortunate to be able to be connected with my first mother. And it was an incredibly emotional journey for me. It was a roller coaster ride. You kind of try and prepare yourself mentally for, what you hope to expect, but what may not happen. My family is great about trying to prepare us in the best way they can. Like, we went to family therapy before we went to try and, emotionally prepare ourselves. My mom went to therapy alone because she knew that she would come up with feelings about being less than as a mother, like insecurities would come up, jealousy possibly. So she wanted to make sure she could get that under control so that that wouldn't come out, in front of my brother and I when we were on this trip, because this trip was about us, like the kids. And so after I met her, and I went to a school of the arts during high school, and my focus was communications, and I was in a TV production class. And so I worked with two other women. Well, I guess we're girls in high school. I don't know. But we made a documentary on my trip to Korea. So when I told my story in that way, because I've always been open since I was a little girl that I'm adopted. I tell everyone this. I'm not afraid to share about that part of myself. Just telling it on the camera lens was a very different way to share my story. And it was very healing, but different than telling a friend or a family member or a stranger or a therapist, And I knew that one day when I felt confident enough in my storytelling skills, I wanted to provide that for other people.
Mm.
And
I went to a performing arts high school too.
Oh,
yeah.
Which one?
Vancouver School of Arts and Academics in Vancouver, Washington. What was the name of yours?
Mine was down in South Florida at the time it was called Alexander W. Dreyfus School of the Arts.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That is so cool. I also was adopted from Haiti with another child who isn't my biological sibling. Mm-hmm. So what was that experience for you? Because I know that with my sister, she and I have had vastly different experiences of adoption, and we are not very close. So how is it with you and your sibling? Hey, I want to share with you something that has changed my life. It's more like someone, my therapist. Why is she so important? Well, because I want to win in this life. I want to break through the carousel of stories I've compiled that hold me back, that keep me from expanding into my full potentiality. Stories of unworthiness, not enoughness, and even stories of questioning why I am here. I also want to stop dumping my unsorted feelings on the people around me and reacting with the same behavioral patterns that keep me stuck. Conversations with my therapist have made me more confident, clearer in my intention, and more centered in my spirit. That is why I am elated that we are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can, from wherever you happen to be right now, match with a therapist tailored to your exact needs. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Someone who you can text at any time and schedule online for either a chat, Zoom, or phone call. And if it turns out that your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Visit the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com, when they were young, to get 10% off the first month. You need to click the link in the show notes in order to get the 10% discount. I want to see you win, beloved. Let's do it together. Visit the link, betterhelp.com, when they were young.
Well, I was adopted in 1984, and then they adopted and I was just shy of 1 year old. So I was pretty much a baby. And they adopted my brother when about 2.5 years later, and he was 6 months old. And so we grew up like, I feel like it was so close in age. Like we didn't really talk that much about our adoption growing up. I felt like, it was great for us to have that connection. Like I look at other adoptive families where like they have biological kids of their their own, and still adopt or adopt before and I'm like, I feel like I would have felt less than not loved enough or as much as if they were to have biological kids. So I was really glad for that we had that in common. But I would say probably high school, we started to become closer, but really after I left for college, like we're very close and talk a lot and talk about adoption now too. But it wasn't something we talked that much about, except for he was in my video that I did in high school. Like we did an interview together and we did talk about that. But we always joke that when he first came to America, like it was during that time in the 80s, the kids, the parents met their kids at the airport. And I was fascinated with him for like 2 weeks. And then I said, you can send him back now to my parents. Of course, like the jealousy, he was getting all the attention now. I'm like, no, I want the attention back. He can go back now.
Well, I think many kids, older siblings do that, whether they are biological or adopted. So that's really cute and funny.
Yes.
I know that my sister probably would have said the same thing had she had a choice. But I'm very curious about Rooted in Adoption. And on your website, I love your value system of advocacy, education, and truth. And how did you come to those three, distilling it down to those three? And what is Rooted in Adoption?
Well, so the book, Rooted in Adoption, A Collection of Adoptee Reflections, was something that my dear friend Veronica came to me with doing a project. And so actually the website is something she put together and, but we both, follow those three tenets, the advocacy, education, and awareness, because, she is a mental health counselor intern and finishing up her master's degree. And so she has that kind of knowledge base on like adoption and foster care and how that impacts us the rest of our lives. And she is also an adoptee, but she is a Black adoptee raised by Black parents. Wow. So same race adoption. And so we connected and I loved this idea. And so we worked together on getting other adoptee reflections and putting this book together. And then she wanted to, make it so that we could possibly provide Rooted in Adoption conversations. So hopefully we'll get that up and running soon. And she got a Rooted in Adoption reflections journal that she's going to release soon that is going to be free for everyone as well. So I wanted to partner up with her and support her work and lift up other adoptee voices. And so that's how we're doing that together. And so I don't want to take credit for that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a collaboration.
Yes, definitely.
And where can people get this book?
It's on BookBaby or Amazon or other various e-sites.
Okay, awesome. I'm definitely adding it to my collection. And on your website, you talk about some roadblocks in your adoption journey. What were some of those roadblocks and how did you use all the work that you've been doing in the world to help you navigate those roadblocks?
Oh, well, that's a tough one. When I first started filming these interviews back in 2012, I had a very different view of adoption. Since I grew up in a loving home with an open, safe environment, and I understood like sort of where my trauma came from my adoption as far as dealing with identity issues, the struggle of trying to find a place where I fit in, the sense of belonging, feeling like I had something missing in my life. I just felt like there was a hole in my heart for so many years. And, So I wasn't prepared for all the different stories I would come across with other adoptees, that within their adoptive families, there was horrific abuse, that some adoptees, one story really was hard for me to hear, like a child got lost in South Korea. Like his family never wanted him to be adopted. He just got lost. And back in the 80s, and during that time, third world countries, when they don't have a good system of locating like small cities and towns, kind of what you saw in that movie Lion, that happens all over the world. And so like just him growing up in an orphanage, but then being adopted when he was an older child, and then reunited with his family. And this is in one of my documentaries. It was so heartwarming, but heartbreaking at the same time. And just sort of then also I was starting to film foster care stories, and sort of how learning that there's a lot of foster care parents and adoptive parents that are not prepared to raise an adopted child, and they are not prepared to know what that really means. And I'm like, I think just coming to accept the fact that I feel like the environment that I grew up in, and it wasn't perfect by any means. I don't think any family is perfect. I just felt like we were very much in the minority, because my mom back in the 80s, she actually went to adoption conferences and listened to adult adoptees and their experiences. And I think that's a big reason why, she raised my brother and I in that kind of environment that a lot of adoptees were starving for and didn't have. Their needs weren't met in that way. But also the one thing my parents, weren't aware of, because a lot of families grow up in this colorblind, environment. I was not prepared for kids making fun of the way I looked, because I grew up in a predominantly white area. And so I didn't have the language on how to react or how to respond. And it was also something I didn't feel comfortable talking to my parents about. So I internalized that. And it's funny because my mom and I, have these open conversations, and she's like, I don't ever remember you telling me this when you were 5 or 6 years old when it started, And I feel like, why didn't I? Like when I talked to her about like adoption stuff, but why wouldn't I talk about like this kind of stuff? And I guess it was probably it was internalized because I didn't think they would understand, because they are white and not Asian. And so basically what happened was I wasn't emotionally prepared to absorb all of these stories. And so it came to a point where I had to take a break. And that was after I had gone to Korea and I filmed another Korean adoptee story. And it was incredibly emotional for both of us. And going to orphanages, and I'm not going to cry. I'm sorry, I get so emotional sometimes.
No, it's fine, please.
It was devastating to see her like go to these orphanages, and they had this huge stack of paperwork, and she was only able to see like a fraction of it. And I also did a second birth search because, I met my first mother back when I was 17, but at the time, all I wanted as a kid growing up was I wanted to know what she looked like. I wanted to know what her personality was like. I wanted to know if she loved me. I wanted to know if she thought of me every day. I wanted to know why, And so what I learned was just all of those things. I didn't think to ask about family health history. And because it was such a struggle for me to get to agree to meet with me, because apparently she had remarried and she kept me a secret. She hadn't told her husband about having a child out of wedlock. And giving that baby up for adoption. And so, I learned all these things when I was 17. It was the year before I was going to college. And so it's a lot to process. And that took me years, more than just a few years, that I've realized to process. And so all of these things were coming up as I'm interviewing these people, other adoptees and their stories. And it was triggering to me in ways that I thought I could handle, like long term. And then also talking to adoptees that weren't as interested in meeting their first mother, also their siblings, their father. And I had never thought of that. I was just obsessed when I was a kid to meet my first mother. That's all I cared about. That's all I wanted to know. And it was reflected in my journaling, in any kind of school projects about self-reflection and identity. It was about that. And so that's why I decided to look for my first father and my half siblings over in Korea, was because I was going again. I was about, I think I was 30 years old, around 29 or 30 years old. And I remember going to Eastern Social Child Welfare Society, or Eastern Social Welfare Society is what it's called now. And they wouldn't let me film like that part. Like my husband, he was my fiance at the time, and Kathy, the other adoptee, were waiting outside while they talked to me privately, the social worker, saying that they weren't able to get into contact with my first father or my first mother. But they did give this letter, which is very generic, saying, someone is looking for you, please contact this number for more information. And they said they handed it to who they think is my sister. And I literally just, started crying immediately, because I'm here in Seoul, Korea, and I'm so close. And you're telling me I have this sister. So it's hard to re-talk about all this stuff again, even though it happened 6-7 years ago. But
of course, it's still in your body. It's still emotionally raw, as many things are. And it makes sense that it took so long to process, because it took me a long time, and I'm still processing. It's one of those things that doesn't have an expiration date, because as soon as you think that you're solid on it, it shifts depending on the circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm still processing meeting my first mother. I believe about 13 years ago, I went back to Haiti and I met her, and I asked all of those questions as to why, and did you still love me? And I was just weeping, keening in front of her. And she was stone cold, just stoic the whole time. And I'm sure she had learned how to survive that way, right? How to not release any kind of emotionality in a heightened moment. And I know she cared for me, but it definitely wasn't manifesting or showing itself in a way that I found comforting. It was definitely one of those situations where it was less satisfying than I had imagined and fantasized about. So how was it for you? Did you get any answers? And how was there a shift for you emotionally that was satisfying?
When I was 17 and I met her, I had a very similar experience. She told me that she was not going to cry. And here I am crying most of this whole meeting with her. And she told me that she always knew she was going to give me away. She always knew that, because she had me out of wedlock. So I would have been not considered a citizen of Korea during that time. And I also wouldn't have been able to go to school, apparently. And I just would have been ostracized and discriminated against by the society because of their views and the shame of being an illegitimate child. And that was hard to accept years later. That kind of went over my head, when she told me that. But that was a hard truth. And then learning that I had 2 older half brothers that she had kept, and I was the one that she gave away. that was hard also later on down the road for me to process. So the element of her being poor, you know, was of course there. That was part of my whole like simple narrative growing up of this reason why I was given up for adoption, because she was too poor to take care of me. And so she wanted to give me a better life. She loved me so much. That's what she did. And I felt like that was just a very small part of the whole story. And it's so much more complex than that. And, you know, when I was 17 at the time, I felt whole after meeting her, you know, because she did say that she thought of me every day, that she loved me. She kept me for 2 months and breastfed me because she knew she was going to do that before she gave me away, because she wanted to give me that bonding time. And so that actually meant a lot to me, because I realized at least I did have a loving home during that time. And I also was in a foster care home, and I met my foster mom, and she brought a picture of me, and I was in this bath and my hair was like in this little tiny ponytail sticking straight up, you know, those typical little Asian babies with their hair and ponytails. Is really cute. And she had so much warmth and love. So to know that when I was a baby that I was loved meant a lot. And so when I was 17, I felt whole again for a time, you know, and that was wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling. But by the time 10 years later, after starting to do all these interviews, after really looking at my story and unpacking it as an adult, not as a child, the wound started coming back again. And I started feeling resentment towards my Korean heritage, the culture, for creating this environment that forces women, essentially to single women, to give their babies up for adoption. Because I kind of skipped that growing up. I feel like, you know, adoptees go through different stages of grief for the loss of their first family, for their country, their language, their culture, for some, if they're international.
I think this is all so beautifully vulnerable and open, and I thank you for it. And I just want to know how you alchemized all of this trauma and grief into your work. Like, your films are gorgeous. Beyond Biological is just stunning. Can you tell me about the process of that?
Oh, yes. Well, so Beyond Biological was inspired by Dr. Wendy Welch. She is the author of Fall or Fly, the strangely hopeful story of foster care and adoption in Appalachia. And she reached out to me in 2015. This is when I was starting to take a break from doing adoption films, because it was just becoming too much for me emotionally. And I had to take a step back for my own mental health. And she was doing research on foster care and adoption in the area as a result of the opioid crisis epidemic that hit that area at least 10 years before it hit the national scene. And she had found my videos and was watching all of them and thought it was an amazing resource, and was using it to help her figure out how to approach doing the research for this book that she was working on. And then in 2018, she finally finished the book, and I read it, and I thought it was a great resource for different foster care and adoptive families. And she said, "Why don't you come film stories up here?" And I'm like, you know, it's been a couple of years. This would be a wonderful way for me to dive back into doing these films. And so from there, I filmed 2 weeks in, I think it was May of 2018. And I just, for all of these films, I've used my just personal funds and gone into debt and my husband's funds too. It's such a passion of mine to do this. I love filmmaking, and that is my professional background, but working in reality TV and documentaries for different TV shows but I'm more of like a story producer and like a post producer. So I don't really film professionally or do editing and stuff. So I just do that for my adoption work. So I have a strong background, like professionally, in storytelling in that sense. And so I basically just ask like a friend or my husband to help me on these projects, and whoever I can get to come help me. And so I didn't want to drive up to Appalachia alone. I felt like as a female, also as an Asian woman, I didn't feel super comfortable going alone to do that. And so my husband couldn't come at the time. So I asked one of my best friends, Nicole, to come with me. And I said I would pay for all of our lodging, travel, and food, and that we'll have like a day to sightsee.
Fun.
Because we went to Southwest Virginia and North Carolina. We're like in the mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous there. And I'm so grateful. One of the things my parents did was we traveled a lot when I was growing up. So I have this huge passion to travel around the world, not just in the US. And so I'm really glad that they planted that seed in me and, helped me realize like how great it is to travel and see different cultures and all that kind of stuff,
Yes.
to have that appreciation. And so that's who I connected with, Wendy Welch, and she connected me to all of these other people that were willing to share their story with me. I mean, I was absolutely blown away by like the stories that I was able to cover and the people that I met. I mean, all of the people I have filmed with over the years, children, adults, adoptive parents, adoptees, foster care kids, social workers, a trauma therapist, mental health counselors. I mean, I have felt so privileged to be able to meet them and to share their stories. It has been such a journey, and I'm so glad that I'm continuing to do this work. But yeah, I felt like with Beyond Biological, I went there with my friend Nicole for 2 weeks, and that was an absolute adventure. And then I decided to go back for another 2 weeks, but she couldn't come with me. So my mom came and helped me, which
Awesome.
was, I mean, I love that my parents, my adopted parents, I'll just say it so that, it's clear who I'm talking about, support my work. That is what I love. And I don't think a lot of adoptees have that from their parents that raised them. And that really breaks my heart, because that's such a big part of our stories, is processing the grief of the loss of not knowing our first family or trying to have a relationship with them when we're in our adult years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wish adoptive parents would be educated like before they adopt about these kinds of things.
Yeah. And I wish that as well. And that's one of the reasons why I launched this podcast and panel series and all of that, because I'm running into so many adoptee stories where the parents fell short for them, and now we have adults roaming the world feeling empty, and they did not have to.
Mm-hmm.
But I am so happy that you have your content out there. Where can people find your content and reach out to you and contribute?
Well, my YouTube channel it's my name, Shelby Redfield Kilgore, but I also have a website for my company called wearemirrorlight.com. And then I have a Facebook page called Adoption Awareness, or of course, Rooted in Adoption, where you can find Veronica and I, but also my YouTube videos as well.
Awesome. And I ask this question to all of my guests. Where in your life can you apply courage?
Courage. I have always been called an old soul by some of my teachers, and but I've always never wanted to let fear stop me from finding out answers from diving into the unknown. And so I've always been brave in that sense. And I hope that other people will overcome any fears they might have so that it doesn't stop them from finding or becoming who they're supposed to be. And, I find that with my breast cancer journey that I found out about, that I had stage 3 breast cancer amidst this pandemic. I find out I have this strength that I didn't know that I had before. It's almost like a forced strength. Mm-hmm. I feel like adoptees are very resilient because we have to be to survive.
Yes.
And, so I found I have this new strength as well, but it's a hard road to travel to live in and to thrive in, because we're constantly living in this place of conflicting emotions like loss, grief, but also joy. And, I'm finding my appreciation for the things that I took for granted in this state that I'm in right now, for my husband, for the people that are in my life as my family and my friends. You don't know how much that love can help you get through these kinds of trying times. And they have definitely been there for me. I also started a third birth search to find out my family health history, since I did not stay in contact with my first mother because she really didn't want it, since she had remarried and started her new life. Mm-hmm. And I was still a secret. And the agency was able to contact both her and my first father. But they said, because I found out I'm BRCA2 positive, so this is definitely hereditary. And that was absolutely so difficult to find out, because I wanted it just to be a fluke. I didn't want it to be something that I should have known about and could have, done more work, or I guess tried to find it earlier. You always go through this, what if you had caught it earlier, if you had known. So that was hard, just going through this other search and not yielding any results right now, because I'm still a secret and she doesn't want to be contacted. But both parents have said that they don't know of any cancer in the family. And that's just, something it's hard for me to believe, because I feel like my whole adoption has been shrouded in secrecy and lies. And yeah. Oh, I did want to tell you one thing that I did find out from my first mother, that I wanted to confirm. She gave me my name, my Korean name, which is Yunmi, and it means beautiful truth or shining truth. And I feel like I have definitely fulfilled that through my adoption videos. And she said, yes, that was the name that I gave you. And I will always treasure that.
Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my guest today. If you liked this episode, the best way to support me and this work is to write an iTunes review, a 5-star review. This helps us reach the top of searches and helps more people to find us. And if you personally want to connect, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook. And I have some great resource material on my website at laniceantoineshelley.com. So go on over there too. Until next we meet, go gently and have courage, my love.